I had just folded the last napkin when my phone rang. Tate's name lit up the screen, and I smiled before answering. He'd probably forgotten something, maybe the dessert. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice unusually light. "Listen, Laura's not feeling well. Something with her sinuses, or maybe a cold? We're gonna cancel for tonight." "Oh," I said, glancing at the pot roast still simmering on the stove. "Poor thing. I hope she rests." "She's already lying down," he replied quickly. "We'll do something next week, promise." The call ended with a polite apology and a click. I turned off the burner, dished out a small bowl for myself, and sat at the kitchen table alone. The folded napkins sat untouched beside me. I didn't bother lighting the candle. By 9, the house had gone still again. I was rinsing dishes when my phone buzzed transaction alert 230 charged at Ridgeview Grill. I froze. Ridgeview Grill was our spot. White tablecloths. Good lamb, the birthday tradition place. Opening the bank app, I checked the timestamp. 15 minutes ago. For a second, I tried to explain it away. Maybe Tate ordered takeout. But who spends $230 on takeout? I tapped to see the receipt for entrees, dessert wine, and a candle fee. A birthday candle. I dried my hands, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into the chilly night air. My feet didn't wander. They knew exactly where to go. Downtown was glowing with Friday warmth. I stopped across the street from Ridgeview under the faded awning of a closed florist. Through the restaurant's front window, I saw them, Tate and Laura, seated at the center booth, kids on either side. Laura wore silk, laughing brightly. A waiter opened a bottle I recognized, the Orenwood Reserve I gave Tate on his 30th. He raised his glass. The kids clinked ginger ales. Laura reached into her purse without hesitation and handed the waiter a black card. My card. I turned before I could see the toast. My breath fogged as I walked home, hands deep in my coat. By the time I reached the porch, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I just sat at the table with the receipt pulled up on my phone, reading it again and again, like it might change if I stared hard enough. 4 entrees, 1 dessert chocolate torte, probably for Sophia, 2 glasses of wine, and a $6 charge for a birthday candle. They celebrated something last night. Something they said was canceled. I opened my banking app and scrolled backward. A few weeks ago, $94 at an electronics store. 2 months before that, $168 at a boutique in Austin. I'd missed them all. This time I dialed Ridgeview Grill. A man answered, cheerful and polite. I kept my voice even. "Yes, I noticed a charge on my account from last night. I'd like to confirm who processed it." He asked for the card details. I read them off. A few quiet keystrokes. "Yes, that charge was processed under a stored profile," he said. "Laura Mercer." I blinked. "I'm sorry." He cleared his throat. "It looks like that card is saved under her name. For convenience. She's used it here a few times before." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Since when?" There was a pause. Then he said it softly, like the volume would make it better. "Just over a year." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in silence. Over a year. I thought about all the dinners I hadn't been invited to, the birthday I spent alone while they were too busy, the time Tate said he'd cover groceries because he felt bad that month. I'd been subsidizing their life. I opened the drawer next to the printer, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and began writing down every charge I didn't recognize from the past 12 months. I listed the dates, the merchants, the totals. When I was done with the first page, I turned it over and kept going. I stapled the pages together and slipped them into a manila folder I labeled In Pen UZ. Then I brewed a cup of tea and pulled out every bank statement from the last 18 months. I set the manila folder on the dining table, smoothing its worn edges. It wasn't new. It had held old insurance papers years ago. Now, it would hold something else entirely. I opened my laptop, logged into my accounts, and began printing every bank and credit statement from the last 18 months. Page after page slid out of the printer, warm and smelling faintly of toner. I took a highlighter and started at the top of the first statement. The familiar numbers calmed me in a strange way: columns, totals, transaction codes. Accounting had always been a language I understood even when people weren't. The first questionable charge was small: $17 at a cafe I'd never been to. Then $39 for a subscription service I didn't recognize. Then a gym membership in a town 30 miles away. My highlighter moved in steady strokes, marking each transaction, turning the page and starting again. Soon, there were airline miles redeemed for a spring trip to Arizona. I clicked back through Laura's photos in my memory sun hats, sunglasses, a poolside lounge chair. I had wished her a happy birthday that week and gotten a single-line reply 2 days later. More transactions surfaced. Streaming services I didn't use, a pair of headphones, a children's museum membership, a dental clinic charge someone's cleaning someone's x-rays. None of them mine. Hours passed. The stack of highlighted pages grew taller. I totaled each sheet, recalculated, checked again, then entered the figures into a spreadsheet the way I used to during end-of-quarter audits. When I finally pressed the sum key, the number filled the screen: $137,800. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I doubted it, every number was accurate, every entry verifiable, but because it represented something I had tried not to admit. This wasn't one mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a pattern practiced and confident, built on the assumption that I wouldn't see it or wouldn't mind if I did. The invoice looked plain on the screen. No flourish, no color, just black text. On a white background, dates, vendors, amounts, categories. Each line a memory I didn't share, a gift I never gave. I formatted it like I used to at work: header aligned, left summary, aligned right. At the bottom, I added 2 bold lines. Total: due $137,800, interest 12% annually. No threats, no exclamation points, just the numbers. I printed 3 copies. The first I folded and sealed inside a heavy envelope addressed and stamped for certified delivery with return receipt. The second went into the USD folder. The third I locked inside the fireproof safe beneath my bed beside my passport and Miguel's old army tags. At the post office, I handed the envelope across the counter without flinching. The woman behind the desk weighed it, stamped it, and slid it into the bin. That was that. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my jacket and began walking with no particular direction, just moving to keep my thoughts from circling back. I passed the library, the hardware store, the little bakery with the cinnamon rolls I used to bring the kids when they were small. I didn't stop. By the time I looped back toward my block, the street lamps were on, and a few porch lights flickered to life. I paused at my own gate, looked at the empty flower bed I'd meant to replant in spring, and realized I hadn't thought about it once during all this. Inside, I put on the kettle and sat down again at the table. There was still more to do. I pulled into their driveway without calling ahead. The house looked the same as it had 6 years ago when I signed the check for the down payment and handed them the keys. Laura had cried that day, saying she never thought they'd be able to raise their children somewhere so beautiful. Tate promised I'd always have a seat at their table. That promise didn't age well. I stepped onto the porch and rang the bell. Laura opened the door, and for a brief moment her face softened into a smile, then froze. Corliss. She said the name stiff in her mouth. What a surprise. I looked past her shoulder. The dining table was already set. Linen napkins, polished silver glassware catching the low light. Fondue pot in the center, bubbling gently. A charcuterie board sat nearby, arranged with almonds, figs, folded salami, and cheese wedges. It wasn't just a weeknight dinner. It was planned. I was in the area, I said, stepping inside before she could protest. Tate appeared from the hallway, still adjusting the collar of his shirt. His hands stilled when he saw me. "Mom," he said slowly, like I'd entered the wrong house by accident. "We weren't expecting, I can see that." I replied. No one offered me a seat. No one moved a plate. The silence hung thick between the candles and the wine glasses. Sophia peeked from around the corner. Emiliano stood behind her. Neither of them spoke. I gave them a small nod, but they disappeared without a word. Laura cleared her throat. "It's just a little dinner. Midweek. Nothing special." I walked over to the counter and saw the wine breathing next to a corkscrew Oranwood Reserve. The bottle I gave them last Christmas. The one they said they'd save for a special occasion. I picked it up gently, turning it in my hands, then set it back down. "You always did love a free meal," I murmured. No one answered. Tate looked at the floor. Laura fiddled with a napkin corner that didn't need fixing. I let the silence settle, then turned and walked back out into the evening. The house was quiet when I returned. I hung my coat, washed my hands, and filled the kettle. The scent of the Oranwood still lingered faintly on my palms. I rinsed them again. I was steeping chamomile when the doorbell rang. Clara stood on the porch, holding a small tin and wearing a cardigan too thin for the cold. Her daughter, Lainey, bounced beside her, clinging to a rolled-up sheet of paper. "Banana muffins," Clara said, with a sheepish grin. Still warm. I stepped aside to let them in. We sat at the kitchen table, the muffins between us, steam curling from my mug. Lainey asked for crayons, and I pulled down the old tin from the pantry, one I hadn't touched since Sophia was her age. She spread her paper wide and began drawing furiously. "I hope we didn't catch you at a bad time," Clara said gently. I shook my head. "Not at all." Lainey held up her drawing. 3 stick-figure women beneath a tall tree, hands linked. One had glasses. One had curly hair. The third wore a large bow, likely meant to be Lainey. "That one's you," she said, pointing to the middle figure. "Me?" I smiled. "I'm honored." Clara leaned over, peering at it. "It's beautiful, sweetie." Lainey grinned and got back to coloring tongue, sticking out the side of her mouth in concentration. I glanced at my fridge. Empty, save for a grocery list and an old postcard from Maine. No school photos, no holiday drawings, no handprint turkeys or graduation invites. Just white space. I looked back at Lainey's picture and felt something shift. Clara was sipping tea, calm and unhurried. She wasn't asking for anything. Just here. When they left, Lainey insisted on taping the drawing to the fridge herself. I let her. It curled slightly at the corners, already soft from her grip. After they were gone, I sat back down at the table, holding the still warm tin of muffins in my lap. I wasn't thinking about the wine anymore, or the silence at the dinner table. I was thinking about what belonged here now and what didn't. Laura's message came just after 9. "This is petty Corliss. Thought you were better than this." I didn't reply. An hour later, Tate called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he sighed, already exasperated. "We didn't mean to upset you. It was just dinner. We forgot to ask, that's all." I listened, letting the silence stretch. He filled it with soft blame. "It's not like we stole anything. You never said we couldn't use the card. It's been saved on file for months. We just assumed." "You assumed," I said quietly. "That's the part I believe. Come on. This doesn't have to get dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I replied. "I'm being accurate." I hung up before he could rephrase his guilt into something flatter. Then I turned to my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the folder labeled Estate, 2018. The document still bore Miguel's signature beside mine. He'd insisted we keep it simple. Fair. A single beneficiary Tate and a short clause for emergencies. I stared at that line a long time before unlocking my laptop. The cursor blinked. A faint draft stirred the curtains. Outside, the wind carried the smell of dry leaves and distant firewood. I began to type. I removed Tate's name, then Laura's. Under alternate beneficiary, I typed Clara Fielding, neighbor. Then donation $50,000. Sunrise Haven Women's Shelter. My hands didn't shake. I reviewed it twice. 3 times. Then I printed it. The pages still warm, I slid them into a new folder, one labeled in red ink revision. I placed the folder on the corner of the desk beside the envelope, addressed to my attorney. Then I reached into the drawer for the old blue pen Miguel once used for every legal signature. The cap was cracked, the ink slightly uneven, but it still worked. When I pressed the pen to the bottom of the last page, it felt like balance. No fanfare. No fury, just correction. Then I stood, took the signed copy to the safe, and turned the lock with a steady hand. I woke early the next morning, made coffee, and spread every receipt across the dining table. The paper felt heavier than usual, as if it carried more than numbers proof pressed into ink. There were handbags, 3 from the same designer, none in my size or taste. Streaming charges I didn't recognize for shows I'd never watched. A flight to Arizona booked the same week I'd spent my birthday alone with a grocery store cupcake and no calls. I stacked each item with a note clipped to it. Not mine. Not mine. Not mine. I opened a blank document on my laptop and wrote the only thing that felt true. This isn't about money. It's about what you assumed I'd never notice. That's all I wrote. No accusations. No names. No timeline. Just the facts. The quiet kind that speak for themselves. Then I took a photo. Just the receipts spread in neat rows, each one highlighted in soft red. I posted it. No caption. Just the statement. By noon, I had 4 calls I didn't answer. By 2, a message from one of Laura's cousins. They've been using your card? We all wondered how they afforded that spa trip. I didn't respond. I wasn't trying to start a war, I was just correcting a narrative. The phone buzzed again. Another message this time from one of the moms at Laney's school. I saw what you posted. Took courage. I hope you're okay. It wasn't sympathy I was after, but being seen, not pitied, just seen, settled something in my chest I hadn't realized was restless. That evening, I took down the grocery list from the fridge and replaced it with Laney's drawing again. I smoothed the curled edges and stepped back. The silence in the house didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt intentional. I made a cup of tea and opened the mail. Most of it junk, except for one envelope, handwritten. The return address was Laura's. I didn't open it. Not yet. The envelope from Laura sat untouched on the counter the next morning. I walked around it while making breakfast, nudging it aside when I reached for the salt, ignoring it when I set my mug down. It stayed sealed, a quiet presence I refused to let dictate the day. By mid-afternoon, my phone rang. Tate's name filled the screen. I let it buzz until the sound felt intrusive, then finally answered. "Mom," he said, voice tight but strangely rehearsed. "We never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing, waiting for me to make it easier. "It was just convenience," he continued. "We figured you knew. Using the card, saving it on the app, Laura thought you were fine with it. We didn't think it was a big deal." I closed my eyes. There it was again, the assumption, the quiet entitlement, the belief that my boundaries were optional. "You didn't ask," I said softly. "Because you didn't think I'd say no," he faltered. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. There was a long silence. I could almost picture him in their kitchen, leaning against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck, the way he always did, when caught in a lie he hadn't prepared for. "We're family," he said finally. A last attempt at moral ground. Family helps each other. Family doesn't hide things, I replied. Family doesn't take without asking. His breath hitched annoyance or guilt I couldn't tell. So this is it. You're just cutting us off. I looked at the manila folders stacked neatly on my desk, the updated will tucked inside the safe, the drawing on my fridge of 3 women under a tree. No, I said. I'm just done pretending. He started to say something, but I didn't let him finish. I ended the call quietly, without anger, without apology. The phone sat heavy in my hand for a moment before I set it down beside the unopened envelope. The house smelled like thyme and warm cornbread when Clara knocked. Lainey peeked out from behind her arms full of colored pencils and folded papers. I opened the door wider. No special occasion, I said. Just soup. That's the best kind, Clara smiled, stepping in. They settled in easily, as if this had always been our routine. I poured the peach tea while Lainey unfolded her drawings at the table. Her newest masterpiece was bright with sunflowers and a fat orange cat napping under a garden bench. She pointed to the tallest figure in the center. That's you, she said, proud. You have a flower hat. Clara laughed. She remembers everything. I laughed too, and something inside me softened further. I tucked the drawing onto the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. The one next to it with the tree and 3 women fluttered gently when I stepped back. We ate slowly. The soup was simple, carrots, beans, broth, but the kind that warms your chest more than your stomach. Lainey asked for seconds. Clara leaned back in her chair, sipping tea, talking about the community garden about a library fundraiser next week. They didn't ask about Tate, or Laura, or what came of the bill. When the plates were cleared and the leftovers packed, Lainey stretched out on the couch, sketching a new scene with her feet swinging over the edge. I handed Clara a tin of extra cornbread and walked them to the door. Next time we'll bring dessert, she said. I nodded. Next time. After they left, the house didn't feel quiet in the way it used to. The silence was full, now restful, like a room that had been reclaimed. I looked at the extra place setting still on the table and didn't feel the need to clear it just yet. Instead, I sat with a book tea still warm, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. I didn't miss the old table anymore. I was building a new one, slower, sturdier, made with care, and tonight I had taken the first seat.